Let's get started. All right. Where we left off with the rabble. How come I'm not, what'd you do? You got my, hang on, I'm all discombobulated here.
Out of the printer and brought it.
Hopefully
we got the right ones.
You got the right ones, you just got them all out of order.
Me?
You.
How did I get them out of order?
Because you paid attention. Hang on a second.
I carried them over here.
5. Okay. Because it print out backwards. Okay. Now, so we in our last discussion, we learned that a rabble had left with the children of Israel as they were exiting Egypt. There was a rabble that went with them. They were not associated with the Israelites. It is not it's not understood completely whether or not these were converts, whether they would become converts, or if they just were taking advantage of the situation and look, they're kicking a bunch of people out. We're just going to get in the crowd and mix in amongst them, right? And they got out of Egypt with them. So there's not a specified number. We don't know how many people it was. Their origins are not mentioned either. It simply refers to them as a rabble left with Israel. And I think that's the reason why the next verses are included in the scriptures. So we're going to pick up our story with the Lord now instructing Moses and Aaron. These are the instructions. So we've seen the preparation. We've seen the preparation for the Passover. We've seen the Passover itself, the plague. But you remember God said, now this is going to be a permanent festival for you. So what we see now are the instructions for continuing the festival. You know, this is basically the decree of the holiday. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, these are the instructions for the festival of Passover. No outsiders are allowed to eat the Passover meal, but any slave who has been purchased may eat it if he has been circumcised. Temporary residents and hired servants may not eat it. Each Passover lamb must be eaten in one house. Do not carry any of its meat outside. Do not break any of its bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate this Passover festival. If there are foreigners living among you who want to celebrate the Lord's Passover, let all their males be circumcised. Only then may they celebrate the Passover with you like any native-born Israelite. But no circumcised male may ever eat the Passover meal. Uncircumcised, excuse me. No uncircumcised male may ever eat the Passover meal. This instruction applies to everyone, whether a native-born Israelite or a foreigner living among you. So all the people of Israel followed all the Lord's commands to Moses and Aaron. On that very day, the Lord brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt like an army. All right. So, who came and who came? These verses discuss who's allowed to participate. So it's just a very simple instruction. No outsiders. All right. So you couldn't be. In other words, if we today were to go over to Israel, we would not be allowed to participate as an outsider in the Passover feast with them. Okay,
you ain't from the hood, you can't come to the barbecue.
That's right. Right. Now, no uncircumcised. Okay, it didn't matter whether you were an outsider or not. If you weren't circumcised, you weren't allowed to participate. So here you go, Travis. Can anybody tell me why?
Well, that was Abraham made that deal with God, didn't he? Or God made it with Abraham.
Yes, it goes back. You had your big chance and you blew it.
Well, he started. I didn't want to interrupt. The gentleman on the floor.
So yes, it goes back to Genesis, that when God first made his covenant with Abraham. In fact, it's the reason there is an Israel. Circumcision was that God promised Abraham a lot of things. Okay, the covenant was, it's like a contract in a way. Okay, in a contract though, you can always, if one party breaches, in other words, if they don't hold up their end, you don't have to hold up your end. In a covenant, not so much. You've promised to do a thing, and that is not conditional on the actions of the other party. So God basically had made a covenant with Abraham, said, I'm going to make you a great nation. Right? That's my part in this deal. Your part in this deal is to be circumcised and to make sure that all your children and your children's children, I mean, it's going to become a thing, right? It's going to become a habit, if you will, okay? So that's the sign of the covenant. So if you were a partaker of the covenant of Abraham, you were circumcised. If you were circumcised, then you were allowed to partake in the Passover. No hired hands. So if you were a foreigner or a slave or a hired, a handyman who was hired to help out on the ranch, you couldn't partake, okay? But if you were a purchased slave, so if you had been bought and you were basically a part of the household, you could if you were circumcised. It all comes back to that, okay? No visiting foreigners. So you couldn't just be there on holiday and the Passover hit and say, hey, I've always kind of wanted to taste roast lamb. Yeah, no, not tonight you don't, okay? Now, those foreigners who wish to be a part of Israel may celebrate, but only if they're circumcised. So naturalized citizens who had become signatories to the covenant by becoming circumcised, they were allowed to participate. Okay? So this pretty much led off the rabble. Now, if you remember from some of our study about Joseph, you remembered that the incident where the two brothers went in, their sister was at least taken advantage of, at worst raped, and they said, oh no, let us get married, right? The man who had done it, he said, let's get married, let's just blend our families together. And remember the two brothers, Levi and what was the other one? Simon? I think it was Simon. Anyway, they went in, they said, hey, you know what? You're right, it's a great idea, but we can't, because remember, had the covenant of Abraham, all of your males will have to become circumcised. And the village elders say, hey, this is a great idea,
Simeon,
right?
I think,
Simeon, yeah, that's what I said, Simeon, yeah. Here in America, we pronounce it Simon. But they said, that's a great idea. If we become circumcised in a couple of generations, we'll have stolen all of their wealth. We'll basically have inherited it. We'll just assimilate them, right? And so they all agreed, and they all got circumcised as grown men. And you remember what happened next. Levi and Simon, or Simeon, the two brothers, on the third day after the operation, when they were all too sore to move, came in and slaughtered the whole village. Okay? So it was no easy thing to decide as an adult to do this. It was a little costly. Now, of course, if you were born into it, you were circumcised on the 8th day, you were 8 days old, and you don't remember it. So, all right, so we also see some additional detail in the instructions. Remember, they told us if the family was too small, they had to eat with another family, right? So that the one lamb was completely eaten. Excuse me. But the lamb cannot be divided between houses. So if it was just you and your wife, and you're like, there's no way I'm eating the whole lamb, and there's a couple next door, y'all could get together and share a lamb. That was fine. But you had to pick a house, and you had to spend the evening there. You couldn't go out, kill the lamb, roast the lamb, and then carry a piece of it back home to have by yourself. Okay? It had to be done there. Now, remember that the feast or the festival didn't involve blooding of the doorpost. That only happened on the original Passover. So what God is doing is he's looking down through the future, and he's like, yeah, they're going to come, they're going to show up for the barbecue and just take a plate and go home. No, that's not the point. The point is togetherness. All right? It's Thanksgiving. And so the whole family comes together. The whole family, plus any friends or neighbors, right, that are around, that you spend some time together. All right? The lamb or any portion thereof cannot be taken outside. And once again, we see the comparison of the people to an army. Suddenly, the army language has popped up, right? God's army. It refers to the people as an army. It's a force, quote unquote. Now, this is the Exodus, the point of the plagues, the judgments of God, the whole thing. It all has run to this moment. Okay? And so the next chapter 13, and I'm not going to read through all of that, but these next verses of chapter 13 cover again the time of the year, the rules of the feast. It's basically a summary, but they also establish a dedication of the firstborn to God. God calls the firstborn, human and livestock, sacred. Okay, they're holy. They belong to me. Now, some of you may remember from your study of Samuel, who was prophet, right, that Hannah, his mother, could not have children. So she prayed to God, give me children. Now, she was in the tabernacle, and she was praying, and the old priest saw her and thought she was just drunk because they were having a celebration. He said, don't be drunk in the church. My goodness, she said, I'm not drunk. Because she was moving her mouth, but she was lip praying. Okay? She was moving her mouth, forming the words, but she wasn't speaking. And so he thought she was drunk. And she said, I'm not drunk, I'm praying, And he said, oh, I'm sorry. Well, God give you whatever you want, right? And went on. That's all. There was the blessing from God, right? I have had that happen to me. We were in a store. We knew the clerk quite well, and she's like, "Oh, I got this terrible headache." And I thought, I said, "Well, be healed in the name of Jesus." And I just touched her on the forehead, right? No, there was no flashlights, no angels, none of that. I was almost kidding, right? It was just, oh, okay, well, be healed in the name of Jesus, right? Touched her on her forehead. And she was like, oh my. And I thought, oh, what did I hit you too hard? I'm sorry. She goes, no, my headache just went away. It just quit. It just left me, right? And I was like, okay, yeah, wow. Yeah. I didn't feel a thing, but she did. And so that's kind of the situation there. Well, she gets pregnant. And so she brings the baby, names him Samuel, keeps him for 5 years, brings him back to the same priest and says, here, he's yours. He's the firstborn, and I promised God that if he gave me a child, I would give him back. Firstborn.
Is that when we get our dedication to our kids?
More than likely, I don't know what the origin of that practice is, But there is a clause in the Old Testament law that you could buy them back, right? So in other words, firstborn sons, children, daughters, had to be given to the temple, had to be given into the service of God. Well, obviously, that didn't happen all the time. But you had to, for the children, you had to buy them back. So in other words, here's the firstborn son. This son belongs to God. And then you redeem that with an offering. You redeem that son. You bought that son back. Now, there were rules for the animals, right? They could be bought back as well. But if they weren't, you had to sacrifice them. You had to give them to God. But the human children, you were just required to bring a sacrifice to redeem them. Now, all of this, right? All of this is intended to bring about a question from children. And so once again, the scripture teaches us that when we're asked why, we're supposed to tell the story. This is what God's saying. When you're asked why by your children, you're supposed to tell the story. This is how God redeemed us. This is how God rescued us. Once again, it brings into focus the fact that parents must teach their children who God is, right? How God has worked in their lives. Now, in verse 16, it says this. I found this to be quite interesting. Verse 16 says, "This ceremony will be like a mark branded on your hand or your forehead. It is a reminder that the power of the Lord's mighty hand brought us out of Egypt." So this whole thing with the firstborn child, the Passover feast, the firstborn child, it's like a mark on your hand or your forehead. Now, where have we seen that imagery before? Revelations, right? Because who is it? Satan, right? Satan, he does what? He puts a mark in the hand or the forehead. What's he doing? He's establishing his children. Just like God is establishing here his children. Now we also see in Revelation, right, when the 12,000 are sealed, what does God do? He puts his mark in their forehead. Now, a lot of people think that in the Revelations, this mark is a real, physical, visible thing. I don't necessarily hold to that. Now, Satan's may be a tattoo or a barcode or whatever you want to. Depends on what conspiracy theory you're listening to. But it may be some type of mark like that, a physical mark. But for God, I think this is the prototype right here, right? It's the ceremony that's the mark. It is embedded deeply within our identity, right? Now, for the Christian church, right, what have we focused on in lieu of Passover? Where's Travis? This is your chance. You're blowing it again. He's in the back.
The crucifixion.
Communion.
No. Communion. There's an older brother for you right there. You got it wrong. The communion.
That's what I said.
Communion. Communion is where what we chose to focus on, right? Because why? Because we're followers of Jesus. Jesus fulfilled the Passover. The Passover was a rehearsal, literally a rehearsal dinner for the crucifixion. Once Jesus had become crucified, right? Because what do we see in the crucifixion? We talked a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago. We see Jesus entering the east gate 5 or 6 days, or 4 or 5 days, whatever it was, when the lamb was supposed to be brought into the house, right? When the Passover lamb was selected, Jesus came in. The Passover lamb was examined. That was the week before, right? And then on the day of Passover, right, the Last Supper is not Passover dinner, right? Y'all remember we discussed that. It is not Passover dinner. It was the Last Supper, but it was not the last Passover. On the day of Passover, right, when the lamb was supposed to be killed, Jesus was crucified. And 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when you were supposed to kill the lamb and drain the blood and get ready to do the thing, that's when Jesus died. He gave up the ghost at about 3 in the afternoon. Jesus was fulfilling all of that, right? So the Passover became a fulfilled prophecy, if you will, right? But what did Jesus instruct his followers, his believers, his redeemed to do in lieu of the Passover?
Remember the Last Supper.
The Last Supper, the communion.
Yep, communion.
Okay? And so we celebrate the communion. Now, we celebrate the communion with flat bread, non-yeasty bread, but that is not necessarily the bread that was in use at the Last Supper. We celebrate the communion with the fruit of the vine, which was a customary drink at the table in those days, right? And so Jesus explained the bread, he broke it. This is my body broken, right? This is what it meant. And so he changed the application of the mark in the forehead and the hand from the Passover feast to the communion. And how often did Jesus tell us to do the communion? As often as we come together, right? To remind ourselves of what? The mark, right? The sacrifice, okay? So here Jesus is saying, God is saying, this is a mark. This is going to become something burned into your psyche. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been reading in the New Testament where Jesus would make some comment and the Pharisees would just go
their mind?
Ape.
Yeah.
Would just go ape. Do you know why? So in one occasion, Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man. So, guys, are we not all son of men? Right? It seems to be a completely innocuous human term. Daughters of men, son of men, right? Because of daughters of son and sons of women, right? Because that would be true. It's a completely innocuous term. But because in the Hebrew mind, mark, right, these scriptures are burned into their psyche. When he said Son of Man, do you know what they saw?
No,
Travis? They saw the verses out of Daniel. Daniel. It was Daniel where he says, I saw in my night visions one like unto the Son of Man, approaching to the Ancient of Days. Now, Daniel had no reason to call out that phrase, Son of Man, except that it was prophetic. He said, approaching to the Ancient of Days, and unto him was given power and dominion forever. So when Jesus said, I am the Son of Man, what was he really saying?
I'm the Son of God.
I'm the Son of God. I'm the guy in Daniel that's going to walk up to the Heavenly Father and be given all authority and all power, right? And it just explodes. This is what the mark does, right? When the communion. That's why Paul would tell us, make sure that you are right with God before you take communion.
It's another thing that when you read throughout the gospel, you'll see interactions between Jesus and the Pharisees. And they will ask this question: by what authority do you say these things, right? What they were asking was, what rabbi taught you to say that?
Right.
And what they didn't understand is they were asking the rabbi of rabbis the question. And then, like Eric said, he would say things in the Aramaic or the Hebrew in specific vernacular and in proper context.
Right.
And they would go completely batty on him because they knew he just called himself the Son of Man, the Son of God, God himself.
You have to understand the arrogance of the Pharisees, particularly during this time. Well, and the Sadducees. They believed that by using the Word of God, that and the traditions that they were the only ones who knew what God meant when he wrote those words. And even God himself didn't understand what he was really saying.
So he needed the rabbis to articulate for God what God really didn't understand what he was saying.
That's right. And if God himself, in other words, they felt like Job, right? If I could get God down here, I could prove that God was wrong and I'm right. And that was Job's whole preface in the beginning was, if I could just get in front of God, I could prove that this has all been a mistake. And when God finally did show up, Job was like, oh, hello.
And like Job, the Pharisees challenged God in the flesh. And when he stood and challenged them back with absolute truth spoken out of his own mouth,
it shut them down.
They were silenced.
Yeah,
couldn't say that.
I'm reminded of the time they got so incensed they drug him out to a cliff. They were fixing to throw him over the cliff and stone him.
Yeah.
And he stopped when he got to the cliff. He stopped and he was like, "What are you going to stone me for? You know, you name the sin, right?" And they couldn't. And he said, "We're done here." He basically walked off, and they couldn't stop him. They couldn't touch him, right? So we have
They had no legal authority.
They had no legal authority, right? So we have to understand. So we have a mark, right, that we carry with us in the form of the blood on the doorpost, the communion, if you will, that runs on our heads. You might call it, your mother might have called it your conscience, right? You shouldn't do this. This is wrong. This is the mark. This is the mark of God working on your life. Okay, so we're going to skip down, like I said, the first part of Exodus 13, which is what I was just discussing. It was just more of the same. So verse 17, we pick it up. When Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through Philistine territory, even though that was the shortest route to the promised land. God said, if the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. Very prophetic. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea, and thus the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. Here again we have the army imagery. He continues, and Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear to do this. He said, God will certainly come to help you. When he does, you must take my bones with you from this place. The Israelites left Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went ahead of them. He guided them during the day with a pillar of cloud. He provided light at night with a pillar of fire. This allowed them to travel by day or by night. And the Lord did not remove the pillar of cloud or pillar of fire from its place in front of the people. Okay, so God, the master strategist that he is, does not pick a fight with the Philistines just yet. And the reason is the people are not ready for war. Now, we're going to see God's wisdom in short order here, because when the Egyptians catch up to them, right, that's one of the first things they do is they go, what? They didn't have graveyards in Egypt? You had to bring us out of here to die? Right? So they actually complain a little bit to Moses. So that's true. They were not ready for war. Now, I want you to take note of this phenomenon, right? There's a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. Now we're going to see this come into play a little bit later in a slightly different way. So in the direction that they're going, imagine, if you will, a tornado, right? Y'all seen The Wizard of Oz? Yeah, that wasn't a tornado. Okay, this pillar of cloud like a tornado. Just, you know what they told me? If you see a tornado doing this, doing the snaky thing, you don't need to worry, because it ain't headed right at you. They go front to back. They do the snaky thing from front to back. So if you see it doing that, it's going away from you. But if you look at it and it looks just like a cloud, a pillar, a straight line, and it ain't moving, it's either headed right at you or right away from you, one or the other. Okay? And there's two things you need to know. You can't outrun it, and you can't get off far enough off to one side to get away from it. Okay? So this pillar of cloud, but at night it turned into fire. Now, you say, well, how bright is that? So I'm going to give you an example. So some years ago now, I was awarded a prize at work, and the prize was I got to travel to Florida, to Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, and witness a shuttle launch. You remember the shuttle, right? Okay, so the shuttle launch was not quite as, I'm told, not quite as powerful as a Saturn V, an Apollo launch, but it's still pretty awesome. We were closer than any other spectator was allowed to be. We were 3 miles from the pad. It was a night launch. And when they lit that thing off, you know, it lit up. It was brighter than anything I could tell you. And as it gained in altitude 3 miles away, I would have had no trouble reading a newspaper. That's how light it became. That was slightly orange. There's a little orange tint, right? But for several moments, you could have read a newspaper quite easily from the light. Okay? And that was a man-made rocket. So here we have God, this pillar of fire. It lit the countryside up for miles. Literally miles. We were 3 miles away. Okay? 3 miles away. So it lit the countryside up for miles. So God has provided a nightlight, and this allowed them to travel at night. Okay? So it's not like when they left Egypt, right? They got up that morning and they packed up and they all headed out, and then, you know, they've gone maybe 10 miles. Because you don't go very fast with a bunch of people and livestock, women, children, old people. Yeah, I was looking right at you when I said it too. Have you ever noticed if you come down Highway 90 from Beaumont, because that's the old trade. I-10, there was nothing there. People wouldn't travel that close to the coast. But Highway 90 was in the old days, 1800s, that was the road. But you ever notice how there's a community about every 15 to 20 miles? Come out of Beaumont, and there's China, and then there's Rye and Romare. You just come all the way down through here. This is Liberty, Dayton,
The watering hole.
Eastgate, right? Because if you were driving cattle, or if you had loaded wagons, that's about as far as you could go. Well, there's a sign. It says Rye and Romare right there. Now, they moved the cities off to one side. Eventually, they're like, get us away from this highway. The car noise is driving us nuts. But that's about how far you could go, and so you'd stop. So somebody thought, if I had a little store here, I could make a killing, because all these, this traveling, that's how you end up with these little towns through here, okay? So they had a light. They could travel at night. They could move out. So they didn't have to stop at night.
But you can also use the same, the full of cloud and the fire. You know how hot it gets on the desert? The cloud and everything can keep it cooler.
That's possible.
I also know how cold it gets on this at night.
That's possible.
So
That's
the
possible.
fire actually kept it warm at night too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kept it warm at night. Now, they could move. In other words, going back to traveling at night, we're going to drive home. It's going to be dark, right? How dark would it be if there was no light? Right? No street lights, no headlights on your car. How many of y'all have ever been up in a high rise? You know, a multiple story building. I've been privileged. I've worked on a couple, and what's always amazed me, I was working on what was then the Transco Tower, the 65-story just outside west side of Houston, just outside the Loop, and was up on the top. So 65 floors up, and they didn't have sides yet. And so we were waiting on time to go to work. It was this time of year, so it was dark before 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm looking down, and the freeways are going by, and one of the side streets there, I can't remember now whether it was Westheimer or one of the side streets, the cars going down. Now, again, I'm 65 stories up. And so you couldn't see the car. All you could see was about this much light. And it was traveling down the road. And it struck me at that moment how small that light was. How much, because I could see from that high up, I could see all around what was obviously a car. I could see all around it. And what they couldn't see was mind-blowing. But I know from driving myself, right? I'm driving along, I got my headlights on. Oh, look, I can see. What you don't see is amazing, right? It's in the dark. Now, if you didn't have headlights, guess what you wouldn't be doing in the dark? You wouldn't be driving. You might not even be walking, right? So, again, they can travel at night. But guess who didn't have a nightlight? The Egyptians. So the fact that they could travel in the daytime and then keep traveling at night, because remember now, they're on for lack of a better term, a sugar rush. We're free, and they are on adrenaline, and they are making tracks, right? So they might have traveled for 24, 36 hours straight, and they put some distance between them and Egypt really fast. Okay. It's how they opened up a lead on the Hebrews, on the Egyptians. Okay, but remember that Pharaoh. What? Oh, I got a thing. Okay, so yeah, I had a map in there. I put this in here. Oh, good, it shows up. Okay, so remember we talked about where is Mount Sinai. These are the possible routes. So this is Succoth right here, and so God, they moved out to here, and then they may have gone down this way. They may have cut right across this way. They could have come out here, down here, and then up to. So each one of these little red triangles, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, there's one right there. And there's a recent one that's not on this map that's kind of up in this area. Each one of those could be Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
Point is, nobody knows for sure, right? None of these cities here, and if you look, it's hard to see. This is a pretty busy map. Hard to see. Some of these cities got little question marks behind them. They're not sure they were actually there, right? What was there? So we don't know. It's not important, okay? And we talked about this, the parting of the Red Sea. They may have come down here, and this may have been where the Red Sea was parted. It could have come over here. It could have been right here, where this was all the Red Sea at the time. Back those many years ago, this leg of the Red Sea may have come further up north. We don't know. Okay, we don't know. I just wanted to show you there is a lot of discussion about exactly where things were some 4,000 years ago. Right? So we don't know. So once again, remember that Pharaoh is not to be trusted, right? No matter how much he claims he's changed, what do we know about Pharaoh? As soon as the pressure is off, right? In fact, the only thing we can trust Pharaoh to do is change his mind, right? So, earlier in this chapter, God warned Moses that this would happen. So this is not completely a surprise to Moses. He told Moses, he's coming, you're going to leave. He's coming after you, and then I'm really going to lower the boom. He didn't say it that way. That's my Southeast Texas deal. So let's read what happened. Chapter 14. When the word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites had fled, now he told them to go. And they came back and they said, well, Pharaoh, they left. And he's like, wait, what? Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. What have we done? Letting all those Israelite slaves get away, they asked. So Pharaoh harnessed his chariot, called up his troops. He took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with its commander. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so he chased after the people of Israel, who left with fists raised in defiance. The Egyptians chased after them with all the forces in Pharaoh's army, all his horses, chariots, charioteers, and his troops. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they were camped beside the shore near Pihareroth, across from Baal-zephon. And as Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done for us? But get this, why did you make us leave Egypt?
You twisted the heart.
Oh, it gets better. It gets better. Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. You want to talk about, holy mackerel, these folks, right? But now, pay attention. Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. Okay. So, true to form, Pharaoh has his regrets, mounts an army to chase after Israel. Now, it certainly looks like, from the language, that Pharaoh went with them. It doesn't mention Pharaoh dying, okay, but it sure looks like he went with them. Remember now also that Egypt is the preeminent world power. A chariot in those days, particularly a really good one, like his 600 best, was like a tank division. Okay, these were the tanks of the day. You couldn't fight back against a chariot. Okay? I want you also to note how the Israelites left Egypt. Fists raised in defiance. They're going out the gates and they're looking at Pharaoh and they're going, ah! Okay? So, what does that mean? They're just rubbing it in a little bit. Right? Now, all of this plays into Pharaoh's reactions. Right? He's witnessed the people leave. They're all shaking their fist in his face. Yeah, just, right? And he's like, how, it grates on him. And the people come in and say, how do we let these people leave? We need to go after them. We need to stop this, right? They basically changed their mind. Now, they catch up easily, okay? It didn't take them long. Now, we don't have a true sense of time. Remember, Israel is traveling by night as well as by day, right? That's why you see some of those, on the map, you saw some of those paths going all the way across the Arabian Peninsula. But remember that Pharaoh is now charging with an army. So he's covering a lot more ground than they are. So he is able to catch up to them. And when they see them coming, now, one thing about chariots, horses, large group of men moving through a desert, what do you see miles off in the distance?
Yes.
Dust. Right? So they're like, hey Moses, what's that dust cloud over there, right? You've all seen the Westerns, right? I see a dust cloud over there. Oh yeah, that's the Indians. They've been trailing us for 2 weeks, right? Moses knew this was coming, right? And so they quickly catch it up and they pin Israel between them and the sea, right? They can't run any further. The water, wherever it's at, whichever fork of the Red Sea we're on here, there's no place for them to go. And the Egyptians are coming hard behind it. Note how quickly the people turn, right? Oh, we were so happy we're leaving. Fists raised and divine. Yeah, boy, that Moses really showed you a thing or two, Pharaoh. And now all of a sudden it's, Moses, what were you thinking? Sure, no, we weren't happy, but at least we were alive, right? Better to be alive and a slave than to be dead in the wilderness, right? You just got to go, wow. Wow. Now, this is not everybody, okay? It's enough people to get a mention, but it's not everybody. There were folks who didn't feel this way, okay? But there were a lot who did. Okay, so they've seen, and this is what gets me. Everybody, we've seen the plagues. We got this cloud pillar and pillar of fire by night. We've got all this supernatural going on around us. And here comes the Egyptians in their chariots. And what is the first thing they do? Panic. They panic. Are we not the same way? Are we not the same way? God can rescue us every day for a week. And then on the very next Monday morning, when the wheels come off, right? What are we doing? God, what are you doing to me? Right? Always like, have you ever been in that position where things are just going so bad, you wanna throw your hands up, look toward heaven and go, why me? Right? But Shannon always says, well, why not you? Right? And I always think God would look at me and go, who said it's about you? Right? Because we're surrounded, Scripture tells us we're surrounded by witnesses. Right? And why did Job go through his trial? You remember?
Show Satan.
To make a point to Satan.
Right.
And the rest of the world. This is how a righteous man, a man of faith, a believer, goes through trial. Because Satan didn't bring him up. Who brought him up? God did. Have you considered my servant Job? There is not a more righteous man in all the earth. Oh, right? And God said, well, let's just see, right? Ultimate faith in his servant Job. So here, they've seen all these things. So what's the moral of that story is? Moral of that story is, just because you've seen the miracle doesn't mean you have immense faith. Right? We just not built that way. All right? Now, note the false choice that they accept. Satan is always going to bring you a false choice. It's either be a slave or be a corpse. It's either be alive or be dead. Right? But what is the choice that God always has us make? Choose me or not. Right? And that's where we're at now. If they choose God, they've chosen life. Right? And so they those my question. Who said anything about dying? They think, here come the Egyptians, they're coming after us. If you just turn around and look in front of you, what do you see? The personification, the actual physical demonstration of God's power. Here's the Egyptians. They're coming at us from behind. I turn around and here's this big, smoky, cloudy pillar spinning around out there, and that's God, because I've been following this thing for a week. I just go wherever it goes. That's a phenomenon that you can't explain. I mean, we don't talk about this very much, but when's the last time you've seen a tornado that stayed 5 miles out in front of everybody and turned into fire at night?
Never.
Yeah, never. I mean, if you get a tornado on the ground for more than an hour and a half, you got something. They've been following this thing for a week or so. But what are they focused on? Oh no, I can't look at God. Let me focus on the problems that are chasing me down. Right? What's the scriptures tell us? Seek ye first the what? Kingdom of God. Keep your eyes upon Jesus, and the things in earth will go strangely dim. Why did Peter start to sink when he stepped out of the boat?
Took his eyes off Jesus.
Took his eyes off Jesus. Started, what did he notice first? The wind. Oh, the wind. Ooh. You ever heard the wind howl? Yeah. And then what did he notice? The waves. For they were boisterous. Right? And then he starts to sink. Well, why weren't your eyes on Jesus? We're all that way. We're all that way. Right? We got to remember. Here's this pillar. I mean, this is a divine apparition right here in front of you. And what are you focused on? The chariots. This is scary. You know, I'd love to have been there, right, where Moses is going, but look. All right. Moses reassures them again, saying these Egyptians that you see now will never be seen by anyone ever again, right? They're not just going to turn around and run and go home. They're going to disappear. All right, so then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people, get moving. Okay? Pick up your staff. Raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will charge in after the Israelites. My great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops, his chariots, his charioteers. When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord. God says, I'm fixing to end this spectacularly. Okay? So what do we see here? What does God say to Moses? Now, if you're thinking, I'm just going to save you a little embarrassment. If you're thinking, God told him to raise his staff over the sea. No, that's not the first thing he said to him. No, that's not. He said, why are you crying to me? Apparently, the people weren't the only ones panicking. Moses himself was like, oh, Lord, what do you want us to do? Right? But at least Moses was looking at God. God, what do you want me to do? And I love God's response to him. He said, tell the people, what are you doing standing around here? Get moving. Pack up. You're fixing to leave this place. Okay? So now we have the famous scene that you've been looking at for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Moses stretches his hand, his staff out over the water. Okay? God will allow the Israelites to cross over on dry ground, and his final act will be the complete humiliation of Egypt and the exaltation of his glory. So, looking at the next verses, and then the angel of God, who had been leading the people of Israel, moved to the rear of the camp. We finally get a little bit of insight. This wasn't just a pillar, a cloudy, smoky something. This was an angel of God presenting as, a pillar. The pillar of cloud also moved from the front and stood behind them. The cloud settled between the Egyptian and Israelite camps. As darkness fell, the cloud turned to fire, lighting up the night. But the Egyptians and the Israelites did not approach each other all night. Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the Lord opened up a path through the water with a strong east wind. The wind blew all that night, turning the seabed into dry land. So the people of Israel walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground. Get this, with walls of water on either side. Okay. So it wasn't fire and ice, it was fire and darkness. Now, the angel and or the cloud or the pillar or however you want to put it, it moves to a rear guard. Now remember, it's been out in front of them all this time. Suddenly, it moves around behind them. Right? That's going to bolster my spirits right away. Oh, look, it's between me and the problem. God's always been between you and the problem. Right? But notice that it gives light, right? So at night, it turned into fire. And so the Israelites can continue to prepare to move, right? They've been told to get busy. And so it turns to fire again, and they can see. Now, in the New Living Translation, which is what I was reading, it's not apparent. But if you go to the King James or the NIV, it's a little bit different translation. It came between the camp of the Egyptians, the cloud, the pillar of fire, and the camp of Israel. It was a cloud and darkness to them, the Egyptians, but gave light by night to these, the Hebrew, so that no one came near the other all night long. So you see what's happening here? So the angel gets between them. To the Egyptians, it's darkness. They can't see to move. But to the Israelites, it's light. And they're continuing to get ready and stage and get ready. Okay? So we see, once again, the Egyptians find themselves enveloped in darkness. That's why they didn't go around. That's why they didn't charge through. It was dark. They couldn't see. Okay? And so, like I said, in King James, the translation is a little bit more accurate, I think. So they couldn't move. Now, this was Charlton Heston's big part. Okay? Maybe the water parted all at once, like we saw in the movie. Maybe it didn't. The thing is, we know they didn't go right away, because the east wind had to blow all night to dry out the bottom. Now, whether it was pushing the water ahead of it, and the water all went at once, which is pretty cool, right? The water all heaped up on either side, just like we saw in the movies, or whether or not it took all night for the water to get piled up there and the bed was dry, in the morning. Either way, it blew all night, and in the morning, coming on to morning time, they were ready to move, okay? So apparently it dried out pretty fast. So sometime during the night or very early, for us, what would be very early in the morning before sunrise, the Israelites started over. They started across the seabed, okay? Bible records no change in conditions for the Egyptians. So they didn't, now remember, they can't see anything. They can't see the Israelites. So the water's parted and they start across, right? And they're going. Now, I know that in the movie, the water parted. Okay? Because Cecil B. DeMille couldn't afford a bigger channel. But it's not to say that God didn't make a really wide avenue. So when you think about, well, how quickly did they get across? Well, if I'm moving 2 million people through a 20-foot channel, it took me a couple of days. But if I'm moving 2 million people through a channel that's wide enough for me to stack 1 million across, how fast could I get across there? I could move everybody all at the same time. I wouldn't have to have anybody waiting. We'd all just go together. We'd link arms and right? No, you're not going there with me. Okay, all right. So don't get trapped into thinking that because Cecil B. DeMille couldn't afford a really huge wide-angle spectacle. It's only a little bit. No, this thing was big enough that they could get across in a hurry. They got across in a hurry. Okay. But remember, the Egyptians aren't witnessing this. They're behind the cloud, okay? I believe they remained in darkness until the Israelites were completely crossed over, which was about sunrise. And then God withdrew the cloud and pillar to the other side of the sea. So the angel moved to the other side. And suddenly, the Egyptians are looking around, and guess what they see? Well, first, guess what they don't see? They don't see the camp, the Israelites there. Then what do they see? There they are. They're coming up out of the water on the far shore. Okay? So, remember what Pharaoh, we're going to get those guys. And so I think that their single-minded pursuit mindset, they didn't stop to consider what they were doing. Have you ever done that? Just charge off into something. You get off in the big middle of it and you go, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? How did I get myself into this? I've been there, done that, I don't know how many times. A couple times just here recently. What was I thinking? Right? And that's exactly what we're going to see. These guys, they jumped in their chariots, they harnessed up their horses, and they charged. Right? If it had been the American cavalry, you'd have heard it going. And down off in it, they didn't stop to think what they were doing. They didn't look at and go, wait. Just wait a minute. That's a 20-foot wall of water over there, 30-foot wall of water. I'm not going to charge on. What are you thinking? No, sir, mister. Okay? Now, remember, I think this explains why they rushed off in there without considering it. And it is apparent that, or it looks like, Pharaoh is leading the troops, right? It says he took with him these chariots. It didn't say he sent them, it says he took with him. And for Pharaoh, this is personal. When he saw them on that far shore, he's like, oh yeah, they escaped me again. They're not doing this to me again. And he charged, and everybody went with it. Now, in the next set of verses here, we're almost done. Then the Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and charioteers, chased them down into the middle of the sea. But just before dawn, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army from the pillar of fire and cloud, and he threw their forces into total confusion. He twisted their chariot wheels, making their chariots difficult to drive. You want to talk about the phrase, when the wheels come off? Right? I don't know if they hit rocks. Suddenly the wheels warped. You ever tried to ride a bicycle with a warped wheel on it? It ain't, yeah. Okay. And so they're making their chariots difficult to drive. Now get this. Let's get out of here and away from these Israelites. The Egyptians shouted, the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Duh. You know, talk about Captain Obvious here. Okay. When all the Israelites had reached the other side, the Lord said to Moses, raise your hand over the sea again, and then the waters will rush back and cover the Egyptians, their chariots and charioteers. And so, as the sun began to rise, Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the water rushed back into its usual place. The Egyptians tried to escape. We just read that. They turned and said, oh my God, get out. They tried to escape, but the Lord swept them into the sea. Then the waters returned, covered all the chariots, charioteers, the entire army of Pharaoh. Of all the Egyptians who had chased the Israelites into the sea, not a single one survived. But the people of Israel had walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground as the water stood up like a wall on both sides. This is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. And the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptian washed up on the seashore. When the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So the Egyptians go into the seabed. God began to disable the chariots. Finally, like I said, Captain Obvious, somebody realizes what's going on. They start to think, what am I doing here? But it's too late. God tells Moses to close the door. No one survived. Bodies washing up on the shore. Israel is in awe. They're just dumbstruck, right? But it won't last. If we continue to read, we would find that they're going to complain because they don't have water. They're going to complain because they don't have food. They're going to complain because Moses has a foreign wife. They're going to complain. Oh my gosh, right? No matter how many miracles God does, for some people, it's just not enough. But God is building a people who will trust him even when the chariots of Egypt are bearing down on them. Right? And what's the New Testament scripture? That no matter what you're going through, God will make a way of escape. Right? There's always a way. God, he's going to put an angel behind you and make a way out for you. Now, they didn't go around the water and they didn't go over the water. They had to go through the water. But God made it possible for them to go through.
You know, it's amazing. Back years ago, there was a big old, I guess you call it stick about this. Some historians said, well, where they crossed it and everything, the water was only about 2 or 3 inches deep. The Bible says dry land, so it was only 2 or 3 inches deep. It's still dry. So they clogged up. Then the Bible says that the Egyptian army was drowned. There's water drowned. Okay.
Right. I had somebody tell me that. Use that as an argument.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a reed sea. It was only a foot deep. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a greater miracle here than we ever thought. He goes, what do you mean? I said, all them horses drowned in a foot of water? That's a miracle, right? Because all the horse got to do is stand there and go, okay, well, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's what I got. That concludes really our story of the Exodus. We're done. Next week we're off. We got Fall Fest.
Okay.
Right? We got Fall Fest. So, but this Sunday we do need to go ahead and set up for Sunday morning. So after we dismiss, we need to do that. Do I have